America. Last call. 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 Last call.
We're live, Lauren.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Last Call with Lourin Hubbard, who I am hosting for right now, and my co-host Brent.
Hello.
We had a couple weeks off. We had a Super Bowl in there. We had a football game at a Rihanna concert in there.
Yeah. We had a pregnant Rihanna concert that sent the megas into La La Land.
Oh, did it? I didn't pay attention to any of the.
Oh yeah.
The outside
stuff. Either it was her music was bad. Oh my God, she's black, or oh my God, she's doing that while pregnant. Like it was, they absolutely, she could not win.
Well, in regards to be fair, I think Justin Timberlake has done enough at the Super Bowl for everybody, and been invited back multiple times.
But they were still mad at the black lady over that whole thing.
I know, sadly. But you know what? Fergie with Slash, when they did that halftime show at the Super Bowl, is just enough. Her singing Sweet Child of Mine, I will never get that screeching out of my ears. Anyway, this week we have a very important and interesting topic to discuss, and allow me to change gears here while I do this, because I have to take off my host hat. And now I'm back as a guest. Hi,
yes.
Brent. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes, I have to do that now because I am a candidate for office. I announced that I will be running for the mayor of Fresno in 2024, and so I have to be a guest on this show. And Brent, why don't you introduce our other guest who's with?
Let's add him in, and we have Mike D'Alessandro, the former city council member and mayor of Battleground, Washington, which is located a stone's throw from me here in Southwest Washington. And I've known Mike well. He was actually a member of my team when I ran for Congress. invited him tonight for discussing why city politics is so important, how city politics not only matters, but how it plays with state politics and federal politics with situations like what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, with the recent train derailment. That how would a mayor handle those situations, and what are the powers of a mayor? And obviously, they vary depending upon where you are, but.
Right.
But how does a mayor wake up in the morning versus a governor versus the president versus a city council member? How does city politics, because at the end of the day, they're deciding how clean my water is. They're deciding how well my sewer runs. They're deciding so many things, and then county government obviously in there as well. But the local level politics, how does this all play out? And how do we support Lourin as a candidate, a good friend? I put in $25 and set up a $5 reoccurring donation to Lourin myself.
Thank you, sir.
Because I believe he's the right man at the right time. And I think that lightning strikes. I really do. And I think that lightning has to strike in politics, but city politics are so important and local politics. So that's the discussion tonight.
Cool. Yeah, and thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate the chance to chat with you. And I wanted to, first of all, congratulate Lourin on, again, stepping up to look for this opportunity to serve the public. I know it's not easy. I've been through many campaigns myself. I know you just went through a campaign recently, and they're tough, but kudos to you for stepping up. Like Brent said, someone has to do it, and we need good people running. So
they are. I thought before this announcement, I thought we were going to get a divorce this week. The way my wife is just... she was just very antsy for us to get this announcement out and do everything. But
all that, and Facebook said I should be your friend.
It's tough. So a huge issue, right, for family. I mean, just in general, right? I mean, you all, both of you guys have had to juggle that as well. So it's a huge commitment for not just you, but the people that support you. So,
yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. I do want to kind of preface the conversation just with the knowledge that America, there's about 19,000 incorporated cities in America.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of people, it's been my experience that a lot of people don't know how their city government functions and what people are responsible for. So just since you've been a mayor before, mm-hmm. I wonder if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about kind of the typical strong mayor versus city council structure a little bit.
Yeah, sure. The form of government I was in was a council manager form of government, and I was what they call a weak mayor. So I didn't have executive powers in my particular position. Most of the jurisdictions in Southwest Washington, where I was at the time, are structured in a similar way, where you don't have strong mayors. Those tend to be the larger cities. So in my particular situation, being someone who served as the head of council, of course, right? Ran meetings, helped set the agenda, worked with our city staff, our city manager, and worked through all the issues that the city might come across, from budgeting to planning to some civil unrest that happened in our community. These are things you have to deal with, and our city manager had those executive authorities vested in her and was hired directly by the city council. So that was sort of our check and balance that we had. The mayor was not directly elected by the people. Sounds like the city of Fresno is different. It's more of an executive role, right?
Correct.
Yeah. But as mayor, it's really important. A lot of people, and you're right, Lauren. A lot of folks don't understand how things work, and I don't necessarily blame them. It's confusing to me, and I'm involved, and have been paying attention to stuff for a long time. But there's just a lot of different structures out there, and so you're right. There's the strong mayor and sort of the weak mayor form of government. So your strong mayors would be the ones who
Ted
have
Wheeler.
Yeah.
Sorry. I had to throw in a local reference for.
Yeah, Ted Wheeler.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's probably a good example of the strong mayor. But yeah, and then you have your weak mayors, which would be the ones who don't have executive authority. So your strong mayors are going to be the ones making, having veto powers and things like that. And in a weaker mayor form of government, you don't typically see that. And where I was in a city of about 21,000 folks. So mid-sized city, not a large city, not necessarily a small city, but a mid-sized city. And the struggles, no matter the size of the community, and I'm sure we're going to talk about East Palestine quite a bit here tonight. But no matter the size of the community, right, you are facing similar challenges. From environmental concerns, like was mentioned in the opening of the show, to, like I said, civil unrest in communities, which can happen, right? Protests and folks are upset about things in your community and are walking the streets or coming to city council meetings and protesting. And just in general, economic development, creating jobs, right? Infrastructure. It's the same in every community. It's just a different scale. So as a mayor, you play that role no matter what strong or weak mayor form of government you're in. You're out there, lobbying for the city. You're out there being the cheerleader, the advocate. You're meeting with, your federal partners, your state partners. You're out there just pushing the agenda of the people of your community. So,
yeah, I think that from issues to like we talked about, land use is a really a big one, but housing I think is probably the most important one right now.
Okay.
Because especially in my neck of the woods in California, we just have a massive shortage of housing, and some of it has to do with zoning and how zoning is done. And it's just taking years and years for projects to be greenlit, not because they're going through environmental impact review or we haven't even got to that phase of development yet. It is just the inclusionary zoning practices and how important that is. But I just think it's important for when we're talking about why mayors are important, because you got to the point is they are the folks that are responsible for the daily operations of cities. And what I think is important to note, because I was going around and Brent can tell you, when you are running for office and you are actually knocking on the doors and talking to folks, as a candidate for Congress, I was met with a whole bunch of things that weren't something that I could actually do for constituents at that level of office I was running for, right? Most of it
I just wanted to scream, let's fund education so people learn civics so they know what these different jobs can and can't do.
Yes, that's part of it. And it's part of the reason why I think that people have felt left out or left behind, because they see all the stuff going for president and this and that, and then they vote for that. But really the folks that have the most direct impact on the day-to-day lives of people are going to be your mayors and city council members.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, you're so spot on. And I've always equated it to, frontline leadership. People talk about frontline managers, frontline supervisors. The local government officials are on the front lines. So you're going to hear from your constituents about issues that are just, again, out of your control. And we had that happen when I was at my city, and that was what the civil unrest and protests and all that was from a statewide voter-approved initiative that folks were upset about. That actually, it's a long story we don't have to get into right now, but Brent's heard about this and knows about it quite a bit. But but it's an example where people came to us because they know who we are, we're accessible, right? There's no bubble around us. We don't have staff. People can show up to our meetings. They can have their 3 minutes. They can have their voice be heard. They know what we look like. They can find us in the grocery store, which happened to me quite a bit when you're out and about, people want to, grab your arm for a second, say, hey, Mr. Mayor, I want to, usually it's a complaint. Usually that's what your job, your job is to listen to folks and respond. Right. So yeah, definitely. It's the front lines. And you get questions, all the national issues, right? People want to know, people want to talk to somebody in government, because I think it's an accessibility issue. And folks feel like it's really tough for me to talk to my congressperson, my senator, very unlikely, my governor, rarely ever, maybe my state legislators, but man, my mayors, my city councilors, my county folks, I know who they are.
Is there, and I'll kind of ask you both, because to me, I think like a great example of a mayor that plays that advocate role really well is what's his Labumba? What's his first name? In Jackson, Mississippi, Chukwe Labumba in Jackson, Mississippi, through the whole water crisis of what's going on in Jackson. And I think he's been a person that has been really great at not only, addressing constituent concerns and letting people in his town know what's happening and being that voice to facilitate that conversation there, but also being an advocate for his constituents at the state and local and federal level with what's going on.
That's a great point, because I don't think most average voters know that when you're serving your community, you're lobbying against hundreds of other communities or thousands, whatever the case may be in your state, to get state dollars. And just imagine, right, when you're looking at federal dollars and federal support, it's not something that folks, I think, really get. I remember, I had a conversation with my dad at one point early on in my, city politics career. And I told him, like, yeah, the city has a lobbyist. We hired a lobbyist to go to the state level, and we have a federal lobbyist. And he thought that was just the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. And I said, well, I'm not going to lie. I kind of agree with you that, we should probably be able to bend the ear of our elected officials and not have to go through a lobbyist. But, there's certain advantages to folks. Lobbyists can be a dirty word. I get it. But, when folks are helping you lobby for money to improve your parks, improve your roads, safety at your schools, infrastructure, you go through the list of things. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because, those are tax dollars coming back to your community, right? It's money that you've spent, your community has put out there into the state or federal government. But yeah, people don't realize when you're elected official how much you actually relationships matter, and building relationships with folks, is sort of your colleagues as well, but also people, at the same level of government, but also your state and federal partners, because you're, like I said, you're the cheerleader, you're advocating for your community and whatever the case, whatever the issue may be. I think folks just don't understand that's how it works. The community I moved to, so I live out in Ohio now. I'm on the other side of the state of East Palestine, but I'm in Ohio near Cincinnati. And I know Brent knows me. I get involved in things. I like to know how things work and understand. So as I learn the local government here and talk to folks, I'm surprised to learn that, the local community here doesn't have any lobbyists. It's one of those things that it just, anyways, it's just there's so much out there that you can advocate for your community and get federal funding and state funding back, which is a big part of the job. If you're doing the job right, as a mayor, you're building relationships with, maybe not the governor directly, because I know there can be it can be insulated a bit, but you're building relationships with staff, right?
Were you surprised to find out that your governor is Dobby the house elf?
God, no, but so we're talking about Mike DeWine here. So Mike DeWine is an interesting fellow. Even before I moved to Ohio,
also has given Dobby clothes. I'm sorry.
DeWine's an interesting fellow. I'm trying to stay serious here. No, I'm not saying. DeWine's an interesting fellow because there's this perception that he's a moderate. There really is.
Oh, there really is. Yeah.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of Democrats that switched parties because it's a party primary here in Ohio. They when you vote in the primary, you are now registered for that party, whatever ticket you pick. And so a lot of people who vote typically Democratic went to the Republican Party to support him because there were some real far out there candidates running against him in the primary. Because you know what, hey, lesser of the evils, right? Is our guy here.
Yeah, same with Kasich before him.
Yeah, no, yeah. So it's yeah, DeWine's an interesting fellow. He's very, very conservative in his policies, but there's this perception by people that he's moderate, and I think that's just because there's obviously a huge section of his party that's gone off the rails. No pun intended.
Oh, wait. This brings us into
Yeah,
off the rails because this has happened.
we can use it as a segue.
Yeah. I will use your segue. I will roll myself over here. But no, we've had a train derailment. We have Mike DeWine saying, hey, Joe Biden's called us, but I don't have any plans on calling him. The train went off the rails, as reporting currently says, due to Trump-era policies that reduce the needs for braking on corners. Like, this seems like not a perfect storm, a horrendous tornado, a bad policy. And how does the local area, I mean, we had a mushroom cloud that is now covering a large area of Ohio and neighboring states that, like, what in the world does the local government do when their governor says, hey, I'm not going to call the president back, we got this, but they clearly don't got this?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. There's a lot going on here, right? I mean, obviously there's a lot to be investigated, and you know, obviously, who's responsible for what, right? Was it because of the braking system? Was it because, you know, I've heard a report, or potentially, you know, these rumors out there too. So again, I don't know what's going to be actual evidence that they're going to find in the investigation about maybe having an axle issue on one of the rail cars. And so I'm in the transportation world too. So this kind of I'm inbound transportation manager. So we do a lot of work, mostly international, but obviously our freight comes over the rails as well. And been in transportation for, you know, most of my adult career. So here's the thing I would say, you know, what we did in Battleground in 2015 in Southwest Washington, believe it or not, we had a tornado go right through the middle of the city. I think it was like an EF0. It was a very weak tornado, but it was literally a block from my house. And it was pretty intense, right? Had it happened an hour or two later, it would have been right when kids were walking home from school. So it could have been really messy and really devastating. But this happened, you know, early afternoon. So anyways, that really opened our eyes to disasters in our community, natural disasters and, you know, man-made disasters like a rail derailment. We had, at the time, not to get too much into this story, but just kind of getting back to your point, though, my point, though, about what local governments can do. We realized we had no contingency plan. We had no plans. We had emergency plans, but we had no, as a council and I wasn't mayor at the time, but, you know, the mayor had no idea what our responsibilities were in that situation. And we weren't sure how prepared the city was. We had our city manager our city manager had left the city. So he was no longer employed. We were in this weird, you know, in between area. We promoted our police chief to interim city manager for, you know, until we had the permanent hire in place. He was on vacation, I think, like in Hawaii or Mexico. It was like
literally a perfect storm.
Perfect storm. Literally a tornado. City leadership is, you know, on vacation. So it was a really eye-opening experience. And so what that did is we rallied, and as a council, and I really pushed this as mayor. We did this as well as we did a lot of what they call tabletop exercises with our emergency management folks here, there in Southwest Washington. And we actually had a train derailment as one of our exercises, kind of how would we deal with it? You know, evacuating citizens and, you know, communication. The big thing in this situation like this, I think, as a local government is consistency and communication. You know, people have to remain, obviously have to communicate well. What's this, you know, what's safe and what's not. Again, that's a whole other topic, I guess, too, about who's telling you what's safe and what's not can be an issue. You know, I don't know, you know, what the mayor was told and when he was told it there in East Palestine, but it's one of those things where, you know, you're given information from likely likely my assumption is going to be from Ohio authorities, right? Who said this is safe, this is okay, or this isn't safe, and kind of gave them the parameters of what they were going to be doing and what was going to be safe and not safe, and where folks could go and not go. And so they communicate that. So I think having consistent communications is really important, and we worked on that. And I think local government can give consistent communications to their best of their abilities with the knowledge that they have, and they can understand their role in that situation. Like, for example, something like that happened in Fresno, right? And you're an executive, you're a strong mayor. You're going to have more you're going to have executive powers you can enact at that point. And that may lead, evacuations. It could be curfews. It could be all kinds of things, right? Telling people not to drink the water, whatever it may be. In different forms of government, you don't have that executive authority. And there's certain powers that are vested with the city manager. There's certain powers vested with the city council. And most of that lies with budget.
A little bit with COVID, a little bit, as far as the need to immediately respond to something.
And it's tough. It's tough. I was on council when COVID. I was on council through 21, and so I was there when COVID hit. And I would say, luckily in our state, there was no ambiguity. It was everything came from the governor's office, the state health department, down to our local health department. So we really didn't have much wiggle room on anything. And luckily, I think that was a little better for us as a local government to not have, to be setting different standards as, say, Vancouver did or Ridgefield did or Seattle even, right? So we were. So yeah, I think local government, it's a huge role here because, again, everybody in that town likely knows, well, a lot of people know who the mayor is. It's a small community, like 5,000 people or so, right? So they may went to school with the mayor. They know the mayor. They know the mayor's kids, T-ball, whatever it may be. And so I feel bad for a person in that position who is likely not an expert in this area, right? Likely not an expert in chemicals and maybe even transportation. And he's there and he has to deal with the situation. And he's in this, again, he's at the mercy of what the wine does or doesn't do, right? It's a really tough situation that I think he's in right now and that community is in. And I don't want to point too many fingers at this point other than what we know. And what we know is what we know, that the Ohio authorities in DeWine were responsible for the controlled burn, right, that happened after the initial accident. And they seem to be in a big hurry to get that rail line opened again. So that's what we know from this point. So it's a
can I want to jump in. I'm playing host tonight because Lourin is guest tonight. With politics, my view always was you can't be an expert on everything. And do you believe that's right, Mike and Lourin? And that should these mayors, these governors be stepping out there and taking and putting on these press conferences where they don't know anything? It like you said, okay, the chances that DeWine has any idea of what's going on in a rail system or the mayor of East Palestine does is like
remote.
It's very remote. And so shouldn't they be coming up and saying, hey, I'm getting advice from Jason, and Jason's going to come up and talk to you about this topic because Jason's resume is this long about rail. Sorry, I'm trying to get my hands in the frame. But that the fact of that, isn't there a part of it in politics, local, county, state, or federal, where you have to just throw up your hands and say, hey, this is not my jam, and I am getting advice from people that know more than I do?
Yes, I if I could just hop in to answer that, I think you're absolutely correct, and I think we saw it through the pandemic, right? We had Trump, who was up here answering questions about COVID without any kind of background in infectious diseases or anything. Meanwhile, in my state, Gavin Newsom, yes, he led a press conference, but there was a whole bunch of people. He would go and say, this is the decision that I made, and here are the people who helped me make that decision. And any questions that you have for them, They're here to answer it. Like, that's really, I think, what I was appreciative of. And so, like, part of it is like, understanding what your role is, and not to play politics, to say that, this whole thing with DeWine, and we're not going to call Joe Biden back or anything, like, that's playing politics. And I think that people at a certain level, like, whether you're Democrat or Republican, when you live in a state and something like this happens, you don't really give a shit who the party is that's in power. You want to know, am I safe? Is my family safe? And what are you doing about it? Right. And so, to your point, I think absolutely. I would not even fathom to present myself as a master of all knowledge ever. But I think that's the point of leadership, right? Is knowing that it was just like Socratic knowledge, knowing what I don't know, that I don't know it, and surrounding myself with the people that do.
Yeah. And, I had a really cool, interesting example that the first year I was on city council, I'm sitting up there, and you feel like, even though I'd been on planning commission and been to all these meetings, you still get up there and you're like, I got to kind of sit back a little bit and kind of feel this out for a little while. We had a topic come up. I don't remember what the topic was, but there was a counselor that had been on the council for about 20 years. He had been mayor for 4 years. I didn't understand what they were describing, the staff at the time of the presentation. And I felt like that was just because I was a newbie. I didn't know. And this guy was like literally an expert on the city itself, if you will, right? He understood. He knew everything operationally, how the city worked, all that kind of stuff, right? Been through all kinds of issues with the city. Didn't know the answer either. He'd started asking questions, and that actually gave me a lot of confidence that, okay, you know what? Like you said, we're all here. We're elected by our neighbors. We're not elected because we're all knowing. We're elected because we're here to be the voice of the people. And be there for them, in our case, two Mondays a month, to sift through all of the bureaucratic BS and everything and try to figure it out. And you're right too. The politics are a big part of it. Luckily serving in local government in most cases, in the smaller side of things, tends to be nonpartisan. And I think that's huge too, because, I told Brent this before. I wish everybody had the opportunity that I have to serve in local government for at least a little while, and have to work with people that you fundamentally disagree with on 8 out of 10 things. And I think we get a little lip service on bipartisanship and working together. No one was whipping my vote. I didn't have someone telling me how to vote on things, right? I didn't have there wasn't a Democratic or Republican vote. There was, we have an issue here. How are we going to fix it? Or are we going to do nothing? Right? Fix it or do nothing, right? Yeah. And I always felt like if you're going to vote no on something, tell me why. Tell me why you're going to vote no. Do you have a better way of doing it? Do you have a better option? Let me know. And in local government, you get a lot more of that kind of conversation. There's just more of it in my experience from what I've seen. Of course, I haven't served in DC or anything like that, but just from what I've seen, it's just like we get this opportunity. And I just wish people had that, because I think it would do us such service to us in a good way in our political discourse in general, just to understand that, there are people out there you can disagree with. Man, if you can work on a couple issues together, you can make some huge changes in your community. And like Brent said earlier, these decisions are right there in front of you. They're not national decisions; they're local decisions. So you got to figure it out. Mayors especially they can't sit there. The good mayors aren't going to sit there and pass the buck and say, hey, you know what? Oh, well, you gotta go figure it out. And I don't know the politics on Fresno City Council, and maybe we want to get into that. But if you were the only Democrat elected on that council as the mayor, you understand the lay of the land, and you got to work with people that you may disagree with on stuff. But if you want to be successful and help people, you got to figure it out. That's what makes, the whole national scene so tough to stomach. And even with the wine, like you said, Brent, there's a little bit of politicking going on in the statement of, like you said, Biden reached out to me on the first day. I haven't called him back yet. And then you have a lot of these, and DeWine being a Republican and been an elected official for a very long time in this state, served in Congress, all that stuff. And then you have Republican elected officials in Ohio and around the country blasting the Biden administration over and over and over again. And I've had my frustrations too. I mean, I've had my frustrations with it. I feel like this is an opportunity that they, or another situation, example, I should say, of when they didn't really get out in front of this as much as they could have and explained it all the way through. And so when you hear the hypocrisy from Republicans about it,
well, that's like
the Democratic.
That's like them.
Said this is a doesn't matter who you are, if you're in that area, it affects you.
But it's like them throwing Pete Buttigieg on the tracks. Like they're, why didn't you stop this? Because the former guy changed the rules that the former guy put in place so this wouldn't happen. Like it's, and we don't know the NTSB report, but I'm just looking at the tweets, at the news stories, at the headlines, and everyone's like, "Oh, let's bash Pete." Okay, well, that's because you think that you're not sure if Biden's going to run again, and you're really scared of Pete. So we're going to trash Pete because he was Mayor Pete. What do you know? Former mayor or former mayor, future mayor. I've got two mayors on here that could be Mayor Mike, Mayor Lourin going for the presidency next. And I'll support either one of you, but they're trashing Pete.
I'm good.
Because they don't know they haven't figured out how to attach this to Biden other than it's DOT, so we're going to drop it on Pete.
Well,
and Pete's part of the Biden administration.
It's frankly, it's all bullshit, right? The fact that like once you look into the issue and you find out that like there's over 1,500 of these like derailment things that happen through the course of an average year, that it's not uncommon for it to happen in the first place, and even more so after this rule change. But to the point of the conversation at hand, I just think that part of it is the projection. This is what I deem to be the Republican playbook, and I see them do it at all levels of government. Is we will project something that we're doing and accuse you of doing it while we do it. That's essentially what
Hi, Lourin Hubbard.
I know, right? So like here's a great example, and I know we're getting off topic, but and we'll rein it back in. But here's the clearest example of that I could see is Ron DeSantis talking about stop woke and all these things, CRT in the schools, because they're teaching all this XXX stuff that we don't like. But then now that he with his governor, his executive powers, he's like pushing to create Christian nationalist based schools and curriculum. And isn't that, I thought we didn't want to indoctrinate. So that's what you're accusing these other people of doing, but you're using your executive power to do that.
Did you know that Ron DeSantis got a high school award for advanced placement, American history, and his extensive work to look beyond what was just in the textbook? He knows all of this. He knows it all.
Ted Cruz went to Harvard. Ron DeSantis, I think.
I'm just saying that Ron DeSantis knows the history, knows it all, but doesn't want anybody else to know it.
Well, all I got to say is, how about that Florida freedom that he likes to talk about, right? And that's the hypocrisy of it all. Like you mentioned, Lourin, right? He all talks about freedom,
Right.
freedom, but as soon as that freedom infringes upon some belief he has, or I'm giving him that. It may be he I don't think too highly of the guy, but he is politically savvy. He's a smart guy. So whether he's using this to his advantage or believes it, that part I'm not sure about. But he's taking this opportunity to go out there and talk about how free Florida is anytime he can. But as soon as something is a little divergent from where he likes to see things, there's another regulation, another big government, right? The whole irony of big government, like big government telling people what they can do with their bodies, big government telling them how they teach their kids. And, I thought they were against, public education in general, it seems, in most cases. I know they're very big advocates for charter schools and even private education, but nonetheless, every time you turn around, it's Florida freedom. And there's another example of something like this where DeSantis does something, and maybe it is the projection. I don't know, but there's I think they're scared. Honestly, I think they're scared of freedom. I really do. I think they're scared.
You said it because there's a YouTube channel that I watch, and I'm not trying to plug anyone, but it's called Civil Rights Lawyer, and he ends every video with "Freedom is scary, deal with it."
Yep.
And he says when your fear comes from somebody else's freedom, that's your problem. And I don't agree with him 100% of the time. He thinks that we should be allowed machine guns because Second Amendment. He believes we should be allowed bazookas. But First Amendment, Fourth Amendment things, he's like, no, they can't pull you over and talk to you for that and it's all true. If you take this person should be on the Supreme Court to say, no, this is what this piece of paper says. And I won't agree with his rulings 100% of the time. But freedom is scary. And the fact that Mike's freedom scares me, the fact that Lourin's freedom scares me, doesn't entitle me to anything. That scared me. That's not anybody else's problem but mine.
Well, it's interesting. Right. It's interesting because the folks who on the right, talk a very interesting game of this. Everybody on the left's a snowflake, and everybody on the left is super sensitive and offended by everything. And your opinion, I'm sorry, my opinion offended you. I see those T-shirts. But as soon as we see something maybe shift in the culture a little bit, right? I mean, God forbid somebody wants to change their pronoun or their name, which has been going on since the beginning of time. But God forbid that happens, right? It's this huge issue that now it's their newest example of this dissension of American culture into this hellscape, and they talk about Rhiannon. You were talking about that earlier. One thing you forgot to mention is people have been talking about the fact she did this too, which is like an Illuminati, some Illuminati thing or whatever. So it's like people find these things. She wore red, right? It's like every day there's another war. Another culture war that they want to fight, and it just gets in the way of getting stuff done. And that's the sad part, because meanwhile we've got all these actually really important issues, rather than whatever they're trying to make it an issue of the day that and scares people, like that. You're right, Brent. The fear thing. I mean, they try to make other people fearful of other people's freedoms. So it's like an either or. Like Lourin can't have as much freedom as I have, because if that happens, then I don't have as much freedom. It's like there has to be somebody suffering, somebody not getting something for me to have what I should have. It's like this. Why can't we all just have freedom, right? With obviously some checks and balances on it, right? We don't want the freedom to go around and just murder people and whatever, right? Steal people's stuff.
Okay, Mike,
right,
and Lourin. 3 answers for being a mayor. You are a former mayor. You are trying to be mayor. Qualified immunity. What can you do to help? How do people support? Mike first, because he's been there first.
Well, as far as you're talking about we're talking about policing or
Yeah.
in general, or all 4 of those questions around policing?
No. Qualified immunity is about government officials getting, whether they're police, mayor, city council, getting immunity for anything they do while supposedly doing their job.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Let me start there. You have to probably give me the questions again because I don't think I remember them all. But it's late here. It's really late here. It's 10 something here. But no, on the immunity side of things, yeah, the one protection we had as a city council, right? The city's insured. It's insured by an agency. As a state agency, or cities have a association of insure cities. Anyways, we have a policy. We have agreements with that insurance agency, what they'll cover, what they won't cover. But as a council, if you're taking action within your scope of powers, within your scope of state constitutional powers, you're indemnified. But as soon as you go outside that scope of power, you lose your indemnification. So it is actually where I was in my community. It was very rigid. Like we as soon as you got outside of your bounds, you got into this territory where you could be personally liable. So that's been my experience with the immunity side of it. And council can also protect the city by not indemnifying a council member. We had that particular provision as well. We could meet and we could vote on not indemnifying a council member who maybe it's in that gray area where they may have stepped out of their bounds, maybe they didn't. But we could do that. I don't think we ever did that while I was on council, but that was also, so those are kind of our checks on it. But what was the other question? Sorry, I'll try to get through it quick.
Oh God, I don't know. Let's go to Lourin because
Well, so I just wanted to kind of.
I wanted the immunity thing, and I yeah.
I'll answer that question before I do. I want to go back to this notion of like, the being scared of someone else's freedom. Freedom is scary, and it's ironic. I think it's really ironic in telling that when a Republican becomes mayor of a city, right? They could be pro Second Amendment. Oh, I hear it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
They're very pro Second Amendment. They get elected mayor. And now that pro Second Amendment stuff dies down a lot because they want people in their city to be safe. And gun violence is ripping through places like Fresno and other places across this country. So like it's kind of this hey, I support
Abbott.
you, but
sorry, Abbott. Sorry, Abbott.
Right?
Sorry.
So it goes back to that whole projection thing, and I don't think you can really. I think a lot of people that are pro Second Amendment that don't want to talk about it when they become in a position where they have to be nonpartisan, like it doesn't happen to them, is someone who I don't want making decisions for me. But to your question about the qualified immunity part, in what other profession does that happen? Does that occur? And I think that the talking point that if we were to address and end qualified immunity, that would stop people from wanting to be police officers. I don't want those people to be police officers in the first place. If that is your stance, that you can't do this job unless you have immunity from wrongdoing, from being charged, because that's what this is. We're talking about is like, you still have your other rights intact. You go through the courts, you get judged by a jury of your peers, right? To take that and say, I don't want to do this job because I don't have the protection that other people in other professions who have to deal with the public, who are dealing with people that can be and often are sometimes violent, looking at nursing. They get, you know how many nurses get abused every year? And yet it's very rare. I'll say very rare because I watched a documentary about a killer nurse on Netflix, but it's very rare that.
Oh,
nurses,
did one actually kill somebody?
Oh, they killed a lot of people, but it wasn't
Oh,
because
okay.
of abuse. But anyway, um, but I just think that if my wife right now was in a situation where she gave somebody the wrong medication and they died, she can't say, "Oh, qualified immunity." So sorry about that one, guys.
Yeah.
Just chuck it out. I'll do better next time. That's not the case.
Well,
But-
let me pull the flip side up on that, right? So because I get what you're saying, I understand completely, but you know, in your normal course of doing business as a city, and you know, if someone wants to sue you because you raise taxes, you know, that's kind of the, you know, personally sue you, you know, I'm not even sure what that, I'm not a lawyer, but just I'm trying to make a situation up, you know, that could happen if you're acting within your normal scope of powers, or for example, you know, you were going to you went through the proper process for rezoning, right? Or you went through a proper process for road planning, subdivision, whatever the case may be, apartments, whatever it is, and people can just, you know, you can say that they can come after you legally. It indemnifies you personally from that. They can go after the city, but they can't go after you personally. See, I think that's the part I feel like I get where you're coming from, but I also feel like there's the other side of it too. But there's got to be something we can do, right? I mean, there's got to be something we can do
in terms of accountability, right? And it's ironic that we have this conversation, and I have this conversation with folks that claim to love the Constitution so much. Oh, we love the Constitution, but yet when we talk about qualified immunity in this topic in particular, the Supreme Court just created qualified immunity out of nothing in a court case, right? If they don't, these people like attacked Roe v. Wade because privacy isn't in the Constitution, but by the same logic, neither is qualified immunity.
Yeah, but it's.
I'm not saying I don't. I don't
even agree with my own argument here. But if you removed qualified immunity from being criminal charges and saying qualified immunity for civil actions, I think we're getting somewhere. Okay, you can't sue me as the mayor for raising your taxes. You can't sue me for being city council. You can't sue me as a cop for pulling you over when you were speeding, personally. But if I do something criminal in my job, something that anybody else would be charged with a crime, then I'm sorry, you get charged with that crime. That's my thought. Like, and it's not breaking qualified immunity. And I agree with Mike, and I agree with Lourin, but it's like, let's take a step and say, hey, if you committed a crime while at work, you're getting charged. I saw a video the other day of a guy from Southern California, 95 miles an hour in a school zone, T-boned a Mercedes, killed a 12-year-old, off-duty sheriff, got 15 months of paid desk leave, and then they said, yeah, we're going to charge him and we're going to fire him. No, he should have been charged the day that he killed the kid, like I would have, or anyone on this screen would have. I'm sorry, if I'm driving 95 miles an hour in a school zone and T-bone a car coming out of a school, I'm getting charged. You're getting charged, and you're getting charged. It's what it is. That's right. And so. Oh, we need to put him on paid administrative leave until we figure that out, because he may have a qualified immunity charge or case. No, you shouldn't. You should not have a qualified immunity case.
And that's like a great example of what's happening here. We have a police officer, Fresno police officer, that ran over and killed a homeless person. And that was literally months ago. But they still have their job. They're still, in fact, I don't even think they're. I think they were on leave and now they're back just on patrol. And there's nothing from the district attorney about it. So like that, I think is egregious, right? That the case
And what
egregious.
did he intentionally? I'm saying, did the cop intentionally
There was no.
run over and kill the
They
homeless
haven't
person?
posted anything if there's even been an investigation. First of all, I don't know if I want to get into it, but we don't even know the facts of the investigation if there was a full investigation. That's the kind of lack of transparency, right? That I think is the problem when it comes to how people feel in their community, right? If we could just see on a story in the news and the newspaper, and it only has 2-3 paragraphs about, hey, this happened, but nothing else. This happened months ago, and we're just learning about it now. That's problematic, right? People, we want information. We want information, and data helps us make decisions.
And you're right. There is this broader, sentiment about government, right? Inherent distrust of government in general and our elected officials and our institutions on both sides. It's not really a partisan issue, right? You can argue that a lot of progressives feel that way about policing, and a lot of conservatives feel that way about whatever they feel about. I mean, it's on both sides, and so I feel like there's a little bit of I'm not getting too into it, but it's on both sides. I don't like doing the both sides-isms, but I feel like that is in that case. There's just inherent distrust. I know they want to get rid of the FBI, the ATF,
Right.
gosh, let's go through the list of things. So, but we are here, with this inherent lack of trust in what's going on. And so the credibility factor, like you said, Lourin, I mean, it feels like if in general, if there's, and I don't know the political climate and the backstory there, but in general, right, so communication is key to building trust. Like the first step, right, in a relationship is communication. And if you have honest, open communication, you build trust as a foundation to start building trust, right? And most communities don't feel that way about their local government or their state government or federal government. They don't feel like the communication is open and honest. It's protective, like they're going to protect their interests. They're going to keep people in the dark on certain issues. And that's not, and there's truth to that. Obviously there's examples of that. So it's not like some conspiracy theory from QAnon. It's a thing. A lot of examples of it. So how do you break through that? And I think that's a big challenge. I'll interview. I'll be the interviewer. I'll ask you that question, Lourin. So how do you break through that lack of trust that the community has in general, not just about policing, but in general, from government, from their local officials or elected officials who feel like they're just handing them a line of BS every time they talk? How would you improve that?
Well, I think that in a lot of cases, and unfortunately, here has been the case that we have very documented history of political corruption, not only with our city council and folks in city council and city government and developers, but also with our police force. And that is the reality for a lot of folks. And unfortunately, you can't run around and chase every whisper to say no, we're good now. But I think that's like part of the reason why we elect good people into government is so that they can demonstrate the openness, right? And I think you demonstrate that openness by having a couple of different models. One of the things in the technocratic age that we have now is that we can be open and transparent with everything, having Zoom meetings for city council meetings, for example, has been really eye-opening, because before you had to be there in person, and who can be there Thursday during the day? If you have a job, you're probably not going to a lot of city council meetings, but the fact that you can watch them afterwards has been really helpful for people to just be informed. The fact that we have a situation where, as a mayor, just like if you were a president or a governor, you have this bully pulpit that you can go around, and every district in your city should have regular town hall meetings. That's just my belief. How can a person be accountable to me if they don't ever see me, or they're not even wanting my feedback? I got to go to a city hall meeting. I got to take time out of my day and do this and do that to be present to you. No, you're supposed to be my elected official. You work for me, right? That's what I hear all the time, is you work for me. Okay, we'll meet. I think it's time we meet people where they're at. And I think that now, with the technology that we have today, and by God, what city councilmen, at least in this city, are being paid, they can make time for every person in this city. And I hear a lot in like closed door stuff about like how, we really shouldn't. Homelessness is an issue that is pervasive in our community, but I've also heard that like it's really important to be looking like you're doing something about the problem. And so they're clearing a lot of homeless camps, right? But not bothering to talk to the people who are homeless, because quite frankly, the people who are homeless and being impacted don't vote.
Yeah.
I was at a city council meeting 2 weeks ago. There was one guy there, and he had signs, and I guess he goes to like every meeting. But he's like one guy, and they give him 3 minutes for public comment. And he's out there advocating for the people in his community, formerly homeless. Hey, look, what are you doing? What's all this happening? What's going on with all this? There's no reason our city's getting hundreds of millions of dollars to address this issue. There should be no reason why the problem is expanding without accountability. And I think that's what we have now, is a lack of accountability, a lack of openness, of saying, yeah, we gave $80 million to this organization. And then that's where the information stops. We have no follow-up. Okay, what did the organization do with this $80 million? How is this $80 million being spent? Nothing. But hey, I can put in a brochure, we've spent $80 million tackling this problem. And so that's what a lot of people that I've talked to so far feel, is that, it's the same old good boys club, and that we are never really going to be in the know of what happens in our city government.
Well, and you brought up a good point about meetings and going where people are. I think that's a great idea. And I'll say their point about the time of the meetings. I think that's always been we had our council meeting. We're a small community. We had our council meetings in the evenings. I think we started at 7. Some meetings started at 6, but we started at 7 with our public meetings. And it's like, you have a public meeting, and you have a public meeting. I don't know what time you said, in the middle of the day.
9 a.m.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, so again, unless you're, retired or wealthy or whatever, not working, you're not going to go. And, it seems a bit, I've always had an issue with that. I mean, it seems that happens a lot with our county government as well, where you get more in these full-time roles. They have the meetings during business hours, if you will. Right. And it's like, look, I mean, people are getting paid a lot of money, whether it's, I'm not crapping on staff or anything like that. They do get paid a good amount of money. Depending on the city you're at, as a public servant, you're going to make a salary. But it doesn't even matter if you don't make much of a salary or one at all. It's like you gotta be available when people can actually come, and maybe that's even on a Saturday. I mean, God forbid, you got to take a time out of your weekend, right? So, but that's what you have to do,
At least once. That's where it starts, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, there's other things that you can do and can be done and will do, but meeting people where they are is the first place.
You learn. I mean, you guys have both campaigned, and it's just talking to people, just being available to people to be their sounding board for whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes. It's a cool experience. Sometimes it can, you get some interesting questions, like you said earlier, but it's a cool experience. But people, they want someone to listen to them, not just sit there and nod their head and oh yeah, sure. Next, your 3 minutes. Next, your 3 minutes. Right? They want people that are actually going to listen to them and try to actually give a damn about them. So that, and those settings, like you said, where people are going out into different neighborhoods, different areas, districts of the community, and meeting, making it more convenient for folks to either show up or, like you said, go to an event that's already existing. Show up to an event and that kind of thing, and just talk to people. They know you're around. They know you're available, right?
How hard is it to have an app, a phone app now that people can download? We have one that works for code enforcement, and it just says, thanks for your submission. There's no follow-up.
Yep.
Like, that part of the thing is follow-up and say, like 2 or 3 weeks later, get this alert back. Hey, you told us about XYZ. We took care of XYZ. Is this problem still pertaining? Yes, no. And just having that level of engagement, exactly. I think we would see a lot more people participating in government if that was the case. Because I got to tell you, I before we started this campaign for mayor, I was working with Ending Poverty in California, and we did listening sessions on poverty, and having people from the community come in and just say, hey, if you had an opportunity to talk with the governor or talk with the leader of the state assembly, what would you tell them about how poverty affects them it affects you right now in your town? And a lot of people at first were very reluctant to say, and then this guy came up and he said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna let y'all know. We've done this before. We do it all the time. We have people who are running for office who come down here and say, hey, we want your vote. What's wrong? And we tell them, and then nothing happens. And so, like, I don't want to tell anybody what's wrong right now. You can come down here and walk down my street and see what's wrong, because these people have not been listened to. There's been no follow-up on the feedback that they've given. So using people trying to use the political process as a means to get change, and now their experience has taught them that's not a way to get change. And so they fall off, they don't participate. And it's really sad, because those are the people that need to participate the most.
Yeah.
Okay, I hate to do this, but I have to. Mike, give us your last word. Then we're going to give candidate Lourin Hubbard / host of this show, he can switch his headset, his last word. But give us your thoughts on local government, how it interacts with the federal government, and why it is so important for people to participate. Just this last week, Valentine's Day, I had to turn in a ballot, my wife and I did, for a local levy here in Vancouver, Washington, and Clark County. It happens multiple times a year. It happens on even years and odd years. But why is local government so essential?
It just impacts every single aspect of your everyday life. It really does. I mean, from your kids going to a school that you want them to go to. I mean, a good school district, their safety, your safety, the road you drive on, the parks in your neighborhood, in your city, the water you drink, your toilets flush. I mean, it's everything. Local government is really, like I said, the frontline operational leadership. I mean, if there's a pothole, if there's a street light out, a red light not working properly, if there's a massive catastrophe like what happened in Ohio with a derailment, local government is on the front lines. I think the interaction with your state and federal officials is the one thing that I honestly wasn't really aware of until I got really close to city council and then ran, is how important that is. Because and I hate to say this, it kind of gets a little wonky, but there's so much money out there that at the state level and federal level, that local jurisdictions, if they're not building those relationships and getting out there to advocate, they won't even know that those pots of money are out there for things that could really help their community. And whether it is, an issue around homelessness, or like I said, an infrastructure issue, I mean, you name it, ballparks, soccer fields being built. There's a lot of different things that can happen. So I feel like it's really important for folks to understand that local government not only is on the front lines, but it's also, another opportunity for you to have a say in your community at a higher level, and being able to get federal support and state support in to help deal with all the things you deal with. Because in most situations, most jurisdictions, they don't have the money to do these things on their own. We couldn't raise enough tax revenue to fix our roads. We couldn't raise enough tax revenue to build sewer infrastructure. I mean, we need help. The money's there. It's the state and federal government have money set aside, competitive grants, low interest loans. I mean, there's all kinds of opportunities out there, and that's where I think the connection and working with your federal and state partners is really critical. And it's a lot of it's behind the scenes. It's not stuff you get out in front of the podium and talk about a whole lot. It really is relationships, and that's why you have to work with folks on both sides of the aisle to get stuff done, and at the state level and federal level as well. I mean, when I served, everybody knew I was as a Democrat, but I had to work with all my state representatives were Republican. My congresswoman at the time was Republican. You had to build relationships with people, and again, I think that's where I wish if we could have the civics lessons right in our schools to understand local government is it literally touches everything in your life. And while we're voting for president is really important, it's just as important, and I can argue even more important, to vote in local elections. And so it's like heartbreaking to see turnout in most local elections, way less than our presidential elections. It's so important.
Okay, to our host with the most, Lourin Hubbard. No, you are our host. You are also a candidate, and tonight you are a candidate. But I'm going to let you close it out with why for Lourin Hubbard, why out of this conversation, bring us home.
Well, I let me first start off by saying thank you to you for having the topic and bringing it up today. And Mike, thank you for being here, because I think you brought a lot of perspective into the conversation. And just like you said, we can, during a presidential election cycle, we hear, and even earlier now, right? It's 2023, and we're already talking about who's running for president and who's not running, which Joe Biden hasn't said he was running yet. I'm just saying. But, we can hardly go 2 minutes without hearing about the importance of voting for president and how much, voting for president matters. But we don't do that same kind of spotlight for local elections, which have, as Mike has already clearly laid out, a greater impact in influencing our day-to-day lives and the things that most people are concerned about, like where the bulk of the spending for our property taxes go, and those budgetary decisions I think are the most important. So for me, it is having the opportunity to have the influence on where our city goes in terms of, are we going to continue to address the symptoms of poverty, for example, with homelessness and crime? Those to me are symptoms of poverty. Or are we going to finally make the investments we need to do in addressing the root causes of that, so we can uh, eliminate those symptoms, right? So for me, that is at the local level and getting involved. I think, one of the most prominent examples of the impact to local economies has been the discussion around legal cannabis and marijuana, especially in California, but especially here in our local, in our city, where we have 2 dispensaries that have now been opened. And this is years after California has already gotten into the business, right? But we have a situation now where we have these equity grants that the city council has created to try to, have a racial equity component to address some of the systemic issues of the folks that had the greatest, were impacted the most by this policy. And our mayor is very reluctant and hesitant to follow through with that, even though we have examples of them working and them revitalizing areas of town that they're in. They provide for their own security, which then provides security for the shops and areas that they're in. So that's just one example of why I think it's really important, and that we will see that what happens on the local level has long lasting effects. And so thank you guys for joining us tonight, and I hope you guys have a great week. We will be back next week with another exciting topic on the same bat time on the same bat channel. So if you enjoyed this program, go ahead and click the like button, subscribe. It helps out the show, the programming here at Dig on America helps us all out. We appreciate it. I love you, and God bless you.